Prime Minister Dr. Terence Drew said the government has moved to stabilize the Development Bank of St. Kitts and Nevis, saying the bank was in serious trouble. Prime Minister Drew was a guest of Maurice E.K. Flanders, host of Issue St. Kitts Nevis, aired on Freedom FM 106.5 on 2nd November. He described the situation at the Development Bank as sad as he disclosed situations that occurred at the bank.
The other one is the Development Bank. I want to say from the onset that we have taken the steps to stabilize the bank. But the bank was in serious trouble when we got there. No money, EK. Excessive overdrafts. Could not meet the daily requirement in terms of even loans that were already given out by the bank. Wow. The bank is in a sad state. It is sad to where the bank had reached. But we have taken the decision that that bank is a fundamental bank for our development, and we have stepped in to make sure that we stabilize that bank. I would say there was a document, and it's very sad that during the last administration of the leadership, there was a document that we received where there was an intent to pay out the last CEO between $600,000 and $1 million for his contract up to 2025, and to still continue his employment with a new contract on new employment terms. That, to me, was a wanton type of approach that would have really destroyed even more the financial standing of the bank. The bank was badly managed. It was run like a bar shop. When you look at how it is structured, you want to know if this is supposed to be a professional institution. But what I want to say to the people who have used the bank, that the bank, we have stepped in and we have done what we had to do to stabilize the bank.
According to Drew, the bank's situation is indicative of the mismanagement carried out under the previous federal administration. Glenn Bart reporting for SKN Newsline. 4 legislative bills will be discussed in the National Assembly when MPs meet in the 4th November sitting of Parliament. According to Cabinet Secretary Dr. Marcus Natter, the bills to be read will be the Domestic Violence Amendment Bill, the Small Business Amendment Bill, a Companies Amendment Bill, and the Evangelistic Faith Church St. Kitts Incorporation Bill. In the Cabinet briefing of 31st October, Dr. Natter explained the importance of the new bills.
The Cabinet approved the Domestic Violence Amendment Bill, which seeks to make much-needed urgent changes to protect victims of domestic violence and provide them with swift access to justice. The bill also allows victims of domestic violence or persons on their behalf to apply to the Magistrates' Court or the High Court for protection orders. This will rectify issues raised with the Ministry of Gender Affairs that the cost of obtaining protection orders only in the High Court was prohibitive for many victims and their families. The Cabinet approved the Small Business Amendment Bill, which seeks to change the minister with responsibility for administering the Small Business Act and appointing the Small Business Development Advisory Committee to the minister with specific responsibility for small business. Previously, the minister responsible was the Minister of Industry and Commerce. The Cabinet approved Companies Amendment Bill, which resolves a constitutional issue created by the 2021 amendment, which allowed for the permanent dissolution of exempt companies to comply with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development and the European Union recommendations. The Cabinet approved the Evangelistic Faith Church St. Kitts Incorporation Bill, which seeks to give the Evangelistic Faith Church situated at the Alley Sandy Point, St. Kitts, the power to own land and otherwise have legal standing. The Cabinet was satisfied that all of the legislative prerequisites for this private bill were satisfied.
The Cabinet Secretary also indicated that research will be carried out on the viability of creating a special economic zone for St. Kitts and Nevis in an effort to stimulate manufacturing activities in the country. Glenn Bard reporting for SKN Newsline.
Your vehicle is very important to you. That's why you should ensure it gets the best service and care possible only at IAS Diagnostic Center, located at Bird Rock behind the Life Fitness Center gym. Come to IAS Diagnostic Center for wheel alignment, rotor cutting, AC servicing, wheel balancing, oil filter change, diagnostic, tire repair and sale, tinting, and much more. With top-of-the-line equipment, come to IAS Diagnostic Center in Bird Rock. Opening hours Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Saturdays, 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Call 767-4422, 662-4416, or 466-6708. IAS Diagnostic Center for quality care of your vehicle.
Want to get away? Now you can.
Stop standing in long ATM lines to withdraw cash. Use your national debit or black cards to complete a wide variety of transactions at supermarkets, variety stores, gas stations, pharmacies, and more. Shop online at the most popular websites and stores for quality brands using your national debit or black cards. And take back your time to enjoy all the things that you love to do. Remember, instead of waiting in long ATM lines to withdraw cash, use your national bank cards today.
National Bank, always here.
The SKN Newsline website now offers you more news. Log on to www.sknnewsline.com for local, regional, and international news. You can also watch the latest newscast and keep abreast with news in sports. All from sknnewsline.com. That's www.sknnewsline.com. News at your fingertips. Nestled between evergreen mountains and the Caribbean Sea on the island of St. Kitts is the Mill House Guest House and Convention Center. With breathtaking views, a rugged, beautiful shoreline, and immaculate manicured gardens make this the perfect location for your holiday, event, or wedding. With a large convention center, apartments with balconies providing stunning views, and a secluded cottage for larger family groups or honeymooning couples looking for some privacy. We have something for everyone. Book your stay at www.millhouseskn.com or visit our Facebook page, the Mill House Guest House and Convention Center, an oasis of tranquility.
It's the gospel event of the year. Tehillah Band presents G5's Go Party. Friday, November 18th, 7 p.m. The Church of God of Prophecy at Buckley's location. Featuring headline artists from St. Lucia, Aaron Henry.
Man, we are coming out. We are coming with the
From the British Virgin Islands, Red White, take it. From Queens to the Nevis, Restoration Gospel Band.
we wanna see Jesus.
And from Sweet Sugar St. Kitts, M1. Roots Band. And the host band, Tehillah.
We pressing God. We going all over.
It's comedy, live music, prizes, games, and ministry. Get your early bird tickets now for only $40 until October 31st. Regular price for tickets, $50. Purchase tickets at Bev's Enterprises on 4th Street. On Nevis, call Yolanda De Castro at 663-7655. Tickets can also be purchased on JAD at events.jad.cash/G-Vibes. It's G-Vibes Glow Party, Friday, November 18th, 7 p.m. at the Church of God of Prophecy, Buckley's location. Come on out and let's turn nightlife into light life for Jesus Christ.
Holy Ghost, carry up. I'm a warrior. Earth, that's a hankara. I'm a warrior.
The recently concluded Investigating Corruption in the Caribbean Media Workshop held in Trinidad and Tobago has been highly received by the Association of Caribbean Media Workers. The workshop, held under the auspices of the Media Institute of the Caribbean, MIC, supported by USAID in collaboration with the International Center for Journalists, ICFJ, was held at the Hilton Hotel in Port of Spain. SK Newsline was part of this training. President of the ACM, Nazima Rugabir, spoke to SK Newsline about the workshop while at the Piakra International Airport in Trinidad.
I have been privileged to be I sit on the Media Institute's board and I'm president of ACM, so I've been part of some of the planning stages. I know there's a lot of work that goes into putting together these things, ensuring that we're not just plucking resource persons from all over the world. These are people who are familiar with the realities of the Caribbean. And you know, that's very important. So I thought it was very rich. You know, journalists participated in every step of the way. Their voices were heard. You heard their challenges. We made note of their challenges because we want to use that as a roadmap to address some of these challenges in the future. And the fact that we had an opportunity to hear from very distinguished but realistic people in the field, people who know what they're talking about, I think that was very rich.
The workshop was attended by several journalists from across the Caribbean, specially selected by MIC. The reporters are expected to work on stories based on their training. Qualified story ideas received grant funding. I'm Andre Huey for SKN Newsline. More can be done by the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, and the World Bank to relieve heavily indebted small island developing states. This includes countries in the Caribbean. That is the gist of the study by EURODAD, the European Network on Debt and Development, a civil society group headquartered in Belgium. According to Iolanda Fresnillo, policy and advocacy manager of EURODAD, most of these countries are heavily indebted due to the impact of the climate crisis on their economies.
So first, we realized that debt was growing quite a lot in small island developing states, and we wanted to look at the data, and the data definitely shows that there was a steep increase, particularly in 2020, but that was coming from already growing debts in the previous decade. That a lot of that debt comes from the impact of climate change. So countries having to invest in resilience and having to cover for the costs of reconstruction after a hurricane or flood affects impacts on their debt levels.
Ms. Fresnillo also argued that climate financing is insufficient.
The other thing that we found out is that climate finance is insufficient, and for instance, between 2016 and 2020, which is the last date that we have data for, seeds paid 18 times debt repayments than they received in climate finance. So it's impossible for those countries to actually really invest what they need to invest in climate resilience if they have to face these debt payments. The other thing that we concluded, we looked at the instruments, the tools, the frameworks that these countries have at hand to tackle this debt, and that they are insufficient, that the present debt architecture is not sufficient or fit for purpose to support the seeds in tackling both the debt and the climate crisis.
She's calling on multilateral groups like the IMF and World Bank to do more to assist with climate financing and debt relief. During the IMF and World Bank annual meetings held recently in Washington, D.C., EURODAD joined other groups, including an organization known as Jubilee, to protest in front of the offices of these two organizations to call for more to be done for small island developing states. Andre Huey, SKN Newsline. Your vehicle is very important to you. That's why you should ensure it gets the best service and care possible only at IAS Diagnostic Center, located at Bird Rock behind the Life Fitness Center gym. Come to IAS Diagnostic Center for wheel alignment, rotor cutting, AC servicing, wheel balancing, oil filter change, diagnostic, tire repair and sale, tinting, and much more. With top-of-the-line equipment, come to IAS Diagnostic Center in Bird Rock. Opening hours Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Saturdays, 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Call 767-4422, 662-4416, or 466-6708. IAS Diagnostic Center for quality care of your vehicle.
Mimi, what's that song? There is no better time to discover what your National Bank Visa debit card can do. It can get you out of a pickle. Using my National Bank Visa card is fast, secure, and convenient.
Cashless SKN is our new lifestyle choice. National Bank, always here.
Online radio has never been this great. It's Voice of the Caribbean Radio at voiceofthecaribbean.net. Tune into Voice of the Caribbean Radio for great Caribbean programs, news, entertainment, sports, and current affairs. Wake up each morning and be inspired with One Day at a Time with Kim Huey. Stay abreast with news across the Caribbean and internationally with the Caribbean News Hour, and be entertained with shows like Reggaeville, Caribbean Classics, and Jive Music Show. Visit our website, download our Android mobile app, or listen us on TuneIn Radio. There is so much more on Voice of the Caribbean Radio, reaching the Caribbean and beyond. Check website or app for program schedule.
Auto Plus Car Wash, located on the College Street Gut, Bastille, St. Kitts. Bring your car to Auto Plus Car Wash to remove water stains, wiper marks. Get your doors, roof panel cleaned, seat floor mats, buffing, headlights, and engine wash. You get quality service at the best price at Auto Plus Car Wash. They really care for your car. Call 765-5140 or visit them on the College Street Gut, Bastille, St. Kitts. Auto Plus Car Wash, where the service is number one. If you're looking for a place to host that special event, conference, meeting, social event, party, whatever the occasion, your best option is the Millhouse Convention Center, Palmetto Point, St. Kitts. Located on the picturesque Garvey's Estate, the Millhouse Guesthouse Convention Center has enough space for outdoor events overlooking the Caribbean Sea. If you're looking indoors, the center is equipped with amenities needed to make your event a success. And by combining both spaces, you're sure to have a memorable event, no matter the occasion. Call the offices at Millhouse Guesthouse and Convention Center to book your next event on simply the most beautiful place in St. Kitts. Call 668-1392. Millhouse Convention Center at Garvey's Estate, Palmetto Point, St. Kitts. Making your event memorable.
For this inaugural flight, Antigua Airways, touching down, the first time a flight from the African continent in the Eastern Caribbean, and you chose Antigua and Barbuda, and for that, we are grateful.
That was CEO of the Antigua and Barbuda Tourism Authority, Colin James. The time was 10:35 Tuesday when Antigua Airways' inaugural flight, YU621, landed at VC Bird International. The flight, which took 10 hours from Lagos, Nigeria, represents the much-awaited beginning of advanced multilateral relationships with the African continent. The crew and passengers received a grand welcome from the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Immigration and Trade for the Honourable E.P. Chet Green and Minister for Tourism and Investment, the Honourable Charles Max Fernandez. Representatives of the Antigua and Barbuda Tourism Authority were also on hand. Minister Fernandez says he is hopeful this opens new opportunities for tourism marketing.
The US and the UK have been our main source markets, US being number one, UK being number two. Nigeria has over 218 million people. And to me, that is the potential for us to be that to be the number one source market for us.
Minister Green agrees the opportunity is steeped in historical importance.
Today gives recognition or realization to a promise made of reconnecting Antigua and Barbuda with our ancestral homeland of Africa. This promise being delivered today represents an expansion and at the same time a diversification of the Antigua-Barbuda economy. We are now looking at, in a real way, trade with Africa, not only in tourism, but in goods and services. We're looking at a reconnecting of our people.
Antigua Airways is a cooperative effort between Antigua's government and Marvelous Mike Press Limited. Alicia Humphreys for ABS News.
One of the issues at stake which led to Tuesday's protest by the UWP has to do with a matter involving Speaker of the House of Assembly Claudius Francis. He announced that Mico South MP and Leader of the Opposition Alan Shastney would be taken to task by the Privilege Committee for statements he made against Cassery Central MP Richard Frederick and Castries South MP Dr. Ernest Hilaire. However, an October 19th letter to the Speaker by Mr. Chasney's legal team claimed violations of the standing orders of the Parliament, in addition to violations to the right to a fair proceeding. This led to the High Court ruling in favor of the opposition leader by granting an injunction against the Privileges Committee hearings, prompting a call by Mr. Chasney for the Speaker's resignation.
The Speaker must do the right thing and resign.
Several other issues came to the fore at Tuesday's march, among them failed promises as described by Mr. Chasney and the vesting of the Castries and Soufrière ports to a developer as part of a $47 million redevelopment project.
We're also talking about all the things that this Labour Party has promised and have not done. Where are the jobs that they've promised? Where is the help for the people during these difficult times? Where is all the transparency? Look at the GP ports. They want to come and say that they've not sold it, but they've given out the concession for 40 years. Who's going to be collecting all of the money? Who is going to be the new landlord for all the vendors and all of everybody else? And why have they abandoned the South?
Another protester also added his voice to that issue.
He sell us back to slavery, back to the white man. And it's time we get our pots back in this country.
Prime Minister Philip Pierre has denied the accusations, explaining that it is a lease agreement and that the assets are not being sold. He also pointed out that the developer was paying a $20 million loan for the St. Lucia Air and Seaports Authority, SLASPA, to free the authority to pursue other business ventures. Another participant in the protest took issue over the failure to complete the St. Jude Hospital after 13 years since the original structure was destroyed by fire in 2009. Successive UWP and SLP administrations have failed to deliver on their promise to construct a new facility.
I am protesting because in the South we deserve a modern hospital. We have been in that stadium for too long, and the South deserve better. I work at the airport, and so our port should never be sold. That should be ours and developed by our people. That's why I'm protesting.
All our citizens, every St. Lucian, from north to south, west to east, we're in the mud. We have to free ourselves and get to the visionary of the former Prime Minister Alan Michael Chasney. And that's the only way it can happen. They are very erratic, undisciplined, victimizing. We have to dispose of the spirit of all these things, nepotism, and that's the only way St. Lucia will progress. Long live the man himself, the visionary man, Alan Michael Chasney, the leader of the opposition. And we need democracy now.
I'm here in protest today. One of the reasons is that our Sky FM radio frequency had been taken away from us last year, November. And I am here today to make sure that the government realizes that this is indeed the people's radio and democracy needs to reign on our radio station. We need to get our radio station frequency back. Sky FM 93.1, the people's radio.
Tuesday's protest march took place in the city center. For the DBS News World, I am Don Nicholas.
The Ethiopian government has agreed a peace deal with Tigrayan rebels after 2 years of fighting. The cessation of hostilities was announced in Pretoria, where the two warring sides have been holding negotiations. There was a surge in fighting before the diplomatic breakthrough mediated by the African Union. At least 500,000 people have died from fighting, hunger and disease related to the conflict in the region.
Today is the beginning of a new dawn for Ethiopia, for the Horn of Africa, and indeed for Africa as a whole. Let me hasten to thank God for this new dawn. We have seen in practice and actualization what we have tried to achieve for ourselves over the years, and that is African solution for African problems.
Let's bring in Famida Miller, who joins us live from Pretoria and has been covering these developments. Famida, what more can you tell us about this agreement?
Well, I think the key points of the agreement have come in the opening remarks from one of the mediators, the former Nigerian president, Obasanjo Olusegun, who has said that, number one, there'll be a silencing of the guns, which ultimately would provide a solid foundation for the preservation of Ethiopia's sovereignty as well as territorial integrity. That, of course, meaning the immediate cessation of hostilities. And also key, given just some of the devastation and difficulties experienced during this hostility, the 2 years of conflict, is an immediate resumption of unhindered humanitarian access. We know that thousands of people have been killed. People have also been affected by the lack of supply of food and humanitarian aid in the Tigray region. And this really has been a vital sticking point in terms of some of the difficulties that have occurred in the last 2 years. We know that Tigrayan representatives have, in these talks and into the media, have also said that Tigrayan people have not only been affected by bullets, that hasn't just killed people, but also the issue of hunger. So I think key in terms of this negotiated settlement is the cessation of hostilities, the resumption of aid, people returning to their places of work, children returning to school. And both parties have said they would want the immediate implementation. And really what is key now is just how well this agreement is implemented.
Indeed, Famida. And how difficult has it been to reach an agreement, and where to from here?
Well, I think one comment from the South African Minister of International Relations and International Relations is Naledi Pandor, who had said in her remarks that she is one of the most relieved people in the room, given how sensitive these talks have been. And she, in fact, was reluctant for South Africa to host these peace talks just because of the dynamics involved, the different parties involved, and perhaps the background in terms of the ethnic difficulties with regard to the Tigrayan people and the federal government of Ethiopia. And that this has been very difficult. It has been 10 days of negotiations, and there hasn't always been official feedback around exactly what's happening. But some of what's come out of these talks is that it has been difficult getting to this point, and there were a number of sticking points, especially given that the Tigrayan people have had a very influential role to play in the politics of Ethiopia prior to 2018. They were the most influential, and that was before the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed came to power, and that also changed that dynamic, despite a constitution allowing Tigrayan people potentially having a channel for secession ultimately. And this is also what contributed to some of the hostilities and people taking up arms. Now, again, what is important is the implementation of this agreement, given that there was cessation earlier this year, but that fell apart by August. And so what happens next, I think, will be watched very keenly. Also, given some of the international, of what people are calling, Ethiopian people are calling international interference in the hostilities and conflict in that country. So those rumored to be involved, those officially involved, would also need to ultimately be party to this agreement. It wouldn't necessarily only be up to the Ethiopian people, but also foreign actors that have involved themselves.
Famida, the agreement is only a few hours old, if less than an hour old officially. How much confidence is there that it will actually hold?
Well, one of the interesting points from the Tigrayan representatives is that they've said they've had to make painful concessions, but this is in the interest of building trust between themselves and the federal government of Ethiopia. And it's quite interesting that they've used that wording, painful concessions, because I think we can conclude that this hasn't been the easiest agreement to come to, and perhaps Tigrayan people are not entirely happy with all of the agreements put in place. Ultimately, yes, a cessation of hostilities, but we have also heard from some on the Tigrayan side who have said that they want, the conflict is one where there have been humanitarian abuses. We've also heard that kind of allegation from both sides, both warring sides against the other. But there has been difficulty in Tigrayan people wanting a greater voice in the federal government in Ethiopia, and also ultimately potentially some level of autonomy. So it's not certain if the agreement does accommodate accommodate all of their needs, but they haven't expressed entire happiness, but certainly putting the humanitarian situation ahead of perhaps the political ambitions.
Yes, speaking of that humanitarian situation, it's certainly been well documented. 500,000 people have died from various situations in terms of starvation or within the conflict itself. Is there hope that the agreement will alleviate some of that pressure?
Well, that is one of the key points reached in the agreement, that there will be an immediate access to humanitarian aid. We've heard during this conflict from the two warring sides, one saying, the Ethiopian federal government saying the areas that they've taken over in the Tigray region, there has been humanitarian access, whereas Tigrayan people have said, well, that isn't the case at all. People outside of the country unable to communicate with family members within Tigray throughout this 2-year period, and that's the claim that they're making. So we are hearing different pieces of information from those two sides, and also knowing that accessing that part of the country by the media hasn't necessarily been very easy. But what is important at this stage is the return to, at least to some extent, normality in that part of the country, access to hospitals, access to food. We also know that the internet as well as mobile phone services have been out. There's been talk of electricity not being available. And so really what is key at this point is that assistance to the people of that region. Both sides have agreed to that the difficulties experienced, the severity of the conflict has impacted people very badly. And what is key at this point is to help people in that region.
Indeed. Thank you so much for bringing us up to speed. Famida Miller, live for us in Pretoria, South Africa. Thank you.
Barbados, being led by their new skipper Shea Hope, sent in West Indies Academy to bat first, and right away Kirk McKenzie was bowled by Ramon Simmons for 4. But Keegan Simmons and Teddy Bishop came together and put together a decent partnership. They both looked comfortable against the Barbados bowling. And that was before Roshan Primus accounted for Bishop when he was on 45, 84 for 2. Simmons continued and would get a top score of 64. He played a poor shot when he should have been thinking about staying, and he paid the price. The young West Indies team was eventually bowled out for 213 in 46.1 overs, Ruston Chase claiming 3 for 31. Barbados had no real concerns. Zachary McCaskey scored a well-played 71, and Ruston Chase was the star with a bat. He struck 86 not out as Barbados reached 214 for 4 in 44.1 overs. Ian Wason, CNC3 Sport.
Welcome to the SKN Newsline Weather Report. I am Janil Boone. Here is a look at the forecast for St. Kitts and Nevis. More detailed weather report, visit our website at www.sknnewsline.com.